Welcome to Strategy and Tragedy. I'm your host, Stephanie Melodia. If this is your first time tuning in, then this is the show for you. If you are a first-time founder, if you're an entrepreneur, or maybe you tried something before and it didn't quite work out, the purpose of this show, as the name indicates, being called Strategy and Tragedy, is learning from other entrepreneurs who have been there, done that, and subject matter experts to help set you up for success. Because genuinely now, the world of entrepreneurship is a well-trodden path, and actually there's enough mistakes that have been made that you don't have to keep repeating the same ones. So I'm here to help set you up for the best chance of success in your own entrepreneurial journey. And today's guest is, of course, no exception. I'm very excited to interview Anne-Laure Le Cunff. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. She is a world-leading expert on mindful productivity and systematic curiosity. Those are already some of my favorite words. She is a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and former Googler. She is also the creator of a learning community called Ness Labs, described as mindful productivity school for knowledge workers. I love that. Featured in the likes of Wired, Rolling Stone, and Business Insider, which is fantastic. And of course, we have her book here. She is the author of Tiny Experiments. I'm loving the cover artwork if you're watching this on video. Anne-Laure Le Cunff, welcome to Strategy and Tragedy.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, I've got so many questions I want to ask you, but all these topics around productivity, like decision making, burnout, like these are all hot topics for all of my entrepreneur listeners. But let's dive in first of all on the neuroscience, because I feel like we all love geeking out about this field. So what's some of the neuroscience that you can share specifically to my entrepreneurial listeners when it comes to productivity? What do we get wrong? How can we actually lean into the neuroscience of our brain to actually be more productive?
You're starting with a big question. I think it's impossible to talk about the neuroscience of productivity without talking about our relationship to time and how the brain processes time. And I think a lot of the reasons why we make ourselves miserable at work as entrepreneurs is because we're trying to treat time as this linear quantitative measure. So imagine a bunch of little boxes that you're supposed to stuff with as many tasks as possible in order to feel efficient, in order to feel productive, right? So very linear. And if you look at your calendar, this is the way it's organized, right? Boxes, linear, in order, with milestones that you have to go through one by one in a specific order. But the brain doesn't process time like that. For the brain, time is elastic. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that this is actually how you experience time. There are moments where 5 minutes can feel like 5 hours. And there are moments when you're so excited that you can spend 3 hours working on something and it feels like only 3 minutes have passed, right?
Oh my God. Okay, Anne-Laure, you have already blown my mind. Of course, a neuroscientist coming on the show would do that. But already within the first few minutes, so true. I've definitely felt that. I think when I'm kind of like struggling, or maybe I'm in my Pilates princess era, right? And there's this funny meme that I've seen online where like you're holding like a very difficult pose and the instructor goes off to talk to someone. You're like, oh, come on. And it's like, it's been 5 seconds, but it feels like 5 years. So I totally get that. I feel like all listeners can relate to that. So how can we utilize this elastic perception of time to better work in our favor?
It's really about not looking at time just as this quantitative measure, but also looking at it as a qualitative measure. What is the depth of the experience? Are you feeling present in the moment? What are the emotions that you're feeling right now? And I know, as entrepreneurs, we love to optimize for anything that we can put in a dashboard with neat metrics that we can look at. So we're not always comfortable looking at things that are a little bit messier, like emotions. But it's really important. A very simple tip is to start paying attention. You can do that for a week to how you feel throughout the day. So when do you feel energized? When do you feel more drained? You can also do that retrospectively. So on Friday, look back at your calendar and color code the blocks in your calendar. Red, orange, and green. Red for when you felt really tired and green when you felt really good. And then the week after, if you have a little bit of freedom around how you organize your schedule, instead of going with the traditional most important task first, eat the frog first, that everybody tells you to do, right? Start with the thing that gives you the most energy. And then do the admin stuff later on.
That makes Makes total sense. If you're tuning into this right now, then first of all, a big heartfelt thank you. I really appreciate it. And secondly, there's a very high chance that you're on your own entrepreneurial journey right now. So whether you're a first-time founder and you're figuring things out and you feel like you're on your own, or if you've done it before and realized that actually this whole entrepreneurship business is a lot easier said than done, then I might be able to help you. If you feel like you vibe with my energy and feel like you need some of that professional big sister direction, support and advice, then I'm opening up a few select spots for that one-to-one coaching, mentorship and growth strategy for ambitious founders. There's a link in the show notes, so check it out and I would love to hear from you. All right, let's get back to the episode. All right, I'm going to ask you a bit of a selfish question because I have definitely noticed an unignorable pattern with my weeks. It's really funny you actually saying this audit. I've noticed that by the time Thursday comes around, I am brain dead, Anne-Laure. I'm so tired. And I actually had a coaching session recently where in our first session, we kind of decided that I was going to set aside the Thursday for some of this creative work. And when we spoke again, I was like, it's just not happening because not only is it just this box of time, but it's the energy, the emotion. I'm so drained. I'm definitely not, pouring from a full cup at that stage. So how could I get out of that? And any other entrepreneurs, founders, business owners that are finding themselves maybe, especially, being very realistic here, if they're feeling the pressure, whether they've got investors or targets or just their own pressure that they put on themselves, right? And they're like, I need to just plug away and keep hitting at something. How can we get out of that and stop those kind of crashes during the week?
Well, first, you do have to communicate to people around you that your creative time is some of your most precious time for the long-term success of the company. And this is something that's really important for you to acknowledge and to communicate to others. Second, once you've decided that this is important, and that's the first step, because too often we say, I'll do that once I'm done with everything else, right? No, this is important. Then you have to make space for it in your calendar. What I recommend playing with, and you can experiment with and see if it works for you, is to block the first hour of every day without any emails, without looking at your to-do list, just for creative and strategic thinking.
Nice.
And that can include reading your favorite newsletters, maybe listening to a podcast that you like, taking little notes, thinking about some of the ideas that have been bouncing around, thinking a little bit longer term, but you're not trying to ship anything. You're not trying to be productive. You're just trying to think around some of the problems that you've been thinking about and not looking at your email inbox, not looking at your to-do list during that first hour can be incredibly powerful.
Pushing back on this because I do believe you, I trust you, I have no reason not to, and it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. And the neuroscience, I'm also aware when you first wake up, your brain waves are also in kind of like beta. Is that true? Yeah. So it's kind
it's going to have an impact on the way you feel for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So it's so important that you protect that first hour.
So this all makes sense, but pushing back and going back to step 0, how can we prioritize that? How can we, more importantly, get over the guilt? Because I'm conscious of, it makes sense, do it, even if, you find a way to just kind of like block out the email and everything and just focus. It's almost like the same idea with like affirmations. I don't know your stance on affirmations, right? But there is an argument that it can be even worse, right? If you don't actually believe these affirmations that you're saying, then all you're doing is you are just kind of further compounding that you don't believe in it, right? And so I wonder whether there's that same risk that can happen here where it's like, all fine and well to hear you as the expert on a podcast saying this, and it makes sense. But realistically, feeling the pressure and being addicted, in all honesty, to that sense of busy work, could that possibly make it even worse? If you're sat there in that first hour and you're saying, no, Anne-Laure, she's told me to block out this hour, but you're doing it in the back of your mind, still wondering what emails are coming in, what have I got to get back to, blah, 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 blah. So I'd love to get your take on that.
And yes, it could make it worse. And this is why all of my work is about, I tell people, experiment. And that's what I said, right? I encourage you to try this and see if it works for you. That's really important. So this can be helpful and maybe it's not. And actually the example you described happened to me. So when I was writing my book, I heard everybody say, start by working on your book. And so block an hour or 2 hours every morning, work on your book, and then you can work on the rest, right? And so I thought, that's brilliant. Let me experiment with that. The idea of an experiment is that instead of committing to it for the rest of your life, you say, let me try this thing for a week or for 2 weeks. So you pick a duration, right? So I said, let me try this. What happened was that there were many days when I just wasn't feeling inspired and I couldn't write anything. And then I felt like crap. And then I was procrastinating on everything else during the day. And I felt guilty because I had made no progress that day. So I changed my experiment. And instead of saying, I need to write 1 hour every morning, I said, I need to write for 5 hours every week. And it could happen anytime. And there were weeks where, yes, I felt inspired in the morning and I would do that first thing. But there were days where that didn't work. And I would spend 5 hours on Sunday feeling all very inspired all of a sudden and actually hitting those 5 hours. And so it's really important, I think, especially as an entrepreneur, anything that you hear on a podcast, take it as a source of inspiration for a potential experiment, but collect your own data because even if it works for other people, it might not work for you.
Yeah, not as gospel, right? And what comes to mind with you mentioning about that 5 hours instead of it being, an hour a day, 5 hours a week, it takes off that pressure. And of course, you mentioned like dashboards and neat metrics, and as humans, we don't operate that way. So, and like women as well, that's a whole other conversation, right? With our cycles and everything else, we go through different energy levels just throughout the days, weeks, months. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on where you draw that line between the discipline that we do need, to put on ourselves versus enough of that freedom to say, okay, the pressure's off. I'm not making things even worse for myself if I don't do my hour this morning. As long as I do it within the week, I'm fine. Where can we draw the line? Because we need a bit of both, don't we?
Yes, I like to think about it as flexible consistency. So it needs to look consistent over the long term, but it doesn't have to be perfect every day. So you can practice kind of a sort of intentional imperfection when there are some days when you know that because of your current energy levels or anything else, life happens sometimes. You might have a spouse or partner or family member or colleague who's sick and you need to cover for them or take care of them. And that's not your fault. And you're not going to be 100% that day. And that's okay. And so really aiming for that flexible consistency. Another thing I really think is helpful is to pay attention to those patterns. Because if it happens one day from time to time that you're not really hitting your targets and you're struggling a little bit, that's completely normal, right? But if that's most days that you're struggling, there might be a systemic problem in the way you're working in general or in the way you're organizing your priorities or managing your energy. And that might be worth looking at and maybe changing something at a deeper level.
Okay, so let's stick with that. What, in your experience, have you seen been the biggest causes of those problems, those systemic issues that mean this isn't just a one-off, this is quite frequent? For example, just feeling pressure. What do you think it is?
Very often it's misaligned ambitions. It's chasing goals because you've been told that those are the goals that you're supposed to chase or because society in general has created those expectations and you're creating this pressure. And when your ambitions are aligned, most entrepreneurs actually can sustain pretty important workload and they're fine. Usually burnout comes from misalignment.
That's very interesting. Have you read the book Energized by Simon Alexander Ong?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it. So he kind of talks about this as well. And this is where I'm a proponent of energy management versus time management, because when you've got the energy and that energy needs to come from that alignment to your point. One of the chapters I remember, or at least a paragraph in that book, was around when you're in love. And it was, we don't talk about it in business, right? But Simon wrote about, when you first fell in love or when you got the butterflies and suddenly, you've got this bountiful, boundless energy. You can do anything, and if they message you to meet at a certain time or go to see them, it's almost like, we become superhuman. So that makes sense. I've plugged someone else's book before doing your book properly, so forgive me for that. Let's talk about your book. So what are can you give us some teasers as to some of the top takeaways in tiny experiments?
Yes, this is a book about living a more experimental life. And so I'm a neuroscientist by training. And what I've realized is that scientists have a completely different relationship to uncertainty than most other people. Not because they're smarter than everybody else, but because they've been trained to approach uncertainty from a place of curiosity. It's really interesting to see a scientist in the lab because when they don't understand something, when they're confused, when they don't get the results they want, they get excited. They feel like, oh, wait a minute, we can learn something. This is exciting. And so the book is really about taking that mindset, which I call an experimental mindset, and using it in your work and in your life by running tiny experiments and by starting from, again, a place of curiosity rather than trying to be in control, by embracing mistakes and imperfection and really trying to learn from whatever data you're collecting.
Love that. And it's very aligned with the entrepreneurial space, right? Especially in those early days when you're trying to find product market fit, you've no choice. You have to have an experimental mindset. Can you give any practical tips to help people mentally be less judgmental and reduce that need for control and really embrace that fully experimental mindset?
It's really about pretending that you're the scientist of your own life.
Yeah.
You are not your data. And so whatever the result, as long as you analyze the result and you extract knowledge from it, this is success. So it's a completely different definition of success than the very binary one that we normally have. It's really a more iterative approach. As long as you keep on learning and iterating, then you're growing. And that's all that matters. What's interesting with this approach too is that it means that you can grow and you can succeed even if you don't have a clear plan as to where you want to go.
Okay, I love that. I think it was Eric Ries, the author of Lean Startup, who wrote, "The purpose of a startup is a vehicle for learning. You just exist to acquire learnings. As long as you're learning, you're making progress. If you're not learning anything, you're not going anywhere." One of the promises with your great book here is to live freely in a goal-obsessed world. That's really interesting. And I definitely feel seen with that writing, right? Like I feel like we're all conditioned from maybe school, from very far back to set goals. And, previously, especially in my like girl boss era, like I've definitely found it exciting to like set targets and work towards achieving them. So I'd love to hear your take on how we're goal obsessed as a world and how do we start to live more freely?
First, it's important, I think, to understand the problem with those big goals that we have. One of the first problems is that it assumes that you know what you want.
Yeah.
Which is a big assumption, right? Very often, if you look back on your life, some of the best things that happened to you, you probably couldn't have predicted.
Yes.
And you would have limited yourself
Very true.
if you had been just sticking to this one goal and ignored all of the other opportunities that you had around you, right?
And I'm so sorry to just jump in here for a quick second, but we might kind of do a re-release of this around sort of New Year time, because obviously we're recording this nowhere near around the New Year, but that's obviously the time when we've got like New Year resolutions, new year, new me and everything else. And someone else opened my eyes to this and we're like, well, hang on a second, like, just taking the classics of New Year's resolutions, you're like, how does the Anne-Laure, the Steph, or whoever's listening to this of the 31st of December of 2025 know what we're going to want by 31st of December 2026, right? We change all the time. We learn, we grow, to your point on experimenting. So yeah, I love that.
And we don't know what we want. We don't know what we will want. We don't know who will we become.
Yeah.
And so those big rigid goals come more from a place of wanting to have this illusion of control, this illusion of certainty, wanting to feel like I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going, but you don't. You actually don't. And so the first step when it comes to freeing yourself from those goals is really just admitting that you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're going to become. And that's actually a really good thing. You want to be able to look back in 5 years and feel like, I had no idea. There was no way I could have imagined that this is where I would end up.
It's very freeing.
Exactly.
Very
yes.
freeing.
And then the second problem is just social comparison.
Yeah.
When everybody is copy and pasting goals from each other, this creates a giant leaderboard where we're always comparing our success to the success of others. And it's very, very, very rare that people come up with their own goals. There's a lot of mimetic desire, right? When you experiment, you're in your own sandbox. You're just trying your own things. You're not really comparing yourself to others. You're just seeing what works for you. So it's a completely different mindset again.
Yeah, I feel like my audience might be the most skeptical group of people to kind of persuade on this, right? Because naturally, if you're entrepreneurial, you are a visionary, you are creative. There's something in the world that you want to create, that you want to put out there. And so that does fall in line with like having goals and self-improvement and pushing yourself and your business forward. So I guess what can you say to the skeptics?
Oh, I can give you so many examples. Like YouTube started as a dating app. Gmail started as someone tinkering one day a week at Google. Some of the most successful businesses were not successful because they had a big goal and they worked really, really hard to get there. They were successful because they worked with the best people. They created an environment where it was okay to experiment, to learn, to make mistakes, and to learn together. And so whatever iteration you were going through, you could tell your team, hey, I tried this. Don't do it. It doesn't work. I tried that. Looks promising. Maybe let's experiment with this. This is how you create a successful business, not by having this blueprint for success that you copy and paste from others.
Do you know what? I'm going to do a bit of a shameless self-plug here very quickly. My signature topic is hacking luck. And one of the core chapters of it is spotting opportunities, because a way to, get lucky is to discover, things that you weren't expecting, right? And so I apply that obviously to business and some of those similar examples. And so lots of takeaways, I think, for entrepreneurs in business. And I wonder whether, okay, it might be easier for solopreneurs, small business owners to say, okay, yeah, interesting. This is a fresh take. I'll read the book. I'll learn more. But then if they've got bigger teams, co-founders, investors, board members, it's taking everyone along on that journey, isn't it? And so if people are starting to employ and build out a bit of a small team in that startup, how are they still able to encourage that curiosity whilst, again, it kind of goes back to that fine line between open-mindedness, being exploratory, experimenting, embracing curiosity versus we still, your salary is paid based on this, X, Y, Z. You need to be delivering on these results. Otherwise, you don't have a job next month.
Yeah, thanks for asking, because I think a lot of people assume when I talk about having an experimental mindset that I'm saying experiment with everything. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is make sure that at any point you have a little bit of space, at least one experiment going. So just to give you an example, let's say that you're organizing a conference for your company, right? And you've been organizing at this beautiful venue for the past 2 years. It works well. The staff is awesome. You don't need to experiment with that. Just go back to the venue, right? But then maybe there are areas that you want to experiment with. Maybe there is a different lineup of speakers, a different format. Maybe you've never done workshops before and you feel like, let's try it, right? Let's experiment with that. And let's experiment knowing that it might fail. It might not work out. It might be a complete disaster. This is okay. We're trying to learn here. So it is really about being intentional and saying, okay, here are the things that are not necessarily experiments. They're projects. We can have projects, right? This is a project. As part of this project, we're going to experiment with this area. And this is something that we know is a little bit higher risk. We've never done it before. And let's see what happens. And this is how you keep on growing and evolving as a business.
Love that. I could not have wished for a better answer to that question, because I think we focus more on one part of your title, which is the experiments. But actually what I'm kind of gleaning from you here is the tiny bit of it, right? And the fact that, to your point, you don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel. But if you can, especially as a business, and especially if you do have some external pressure or investors to answer to, then it's saying there's this one thing. And I think your language point is very important as well. We're calling it a project. We're calling it a sprint. It's like the terms we choose to use is so important as well. It's like there's one thing we're going to play with, and then that means, of course, depending on your company's risk tolerance, you're not suddenly betting everything on this one thing, because we don't know. That's inherent to risk taking. Another big topic that you talk about is decision making. Oh my God, Anne-Laure, I could keep you in here for 17 hours just on the subject of decision making. So let's open this topic with, again, the pressure we put on ourselves to make the right decision, to get the decision right. Talk to me about that.
Well, very often as entrepreneurs, especially, we feel like, and it is the case quite often, once we've made a decision, it is going to have consequences where it is kind of hard to backtrack, right? And so when you make decisions that actually have consequences on other people, you talked about people's salaries, their livelihood, your customers, you're responsible. You feel responsible for them. And so I don't necessarily think that it is a bad thing that we feel responsible and we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about those big decisions. The issue is that quite often we only make decisions based on what I call external signals. And external signals are anything that you can put in a dashboard. If it can be turned into a number, a metric, something we can neatly measure and put in an Excel file, we love it. And we make our decisions like this, right? We very rarely look at internal signals. How does it feel to do the thing? So if you're launching a project, let's say, I'm going to give you a personal example. A couple of years ago, I ran an experiment launching a YouTube channel because everybody was telling me, as an entrepreneur, you need a YouTube channel. If you're not on YouTube, you're going to be obsolete. You have to launch your YouTube channel. I said, okay, let me experiment with that. Again, an experiment has a specific duration. So I said, I'm going to try this for a couple of months. One video every week for a couple of months, and then we'll see. External signals, great. Quite a few subscribers, comments, likes, all of that. In the green, beautiful. Internal signals. Every time I was sitting in front of my camera to record a YouTube video, I was dreading it. Absolutely dreading it.
Interesting.
And it had downstream consequences on the rest of my day because every time I knew it was on Thursday, I was supposed to record my video. Every Thursday, I could not work on anything else. I could not focus because I knew that at 2 p.m. I was supposed to sit down and record this video. And so at the end of the experiment, I said, you know what, actually, I'm going to keep on focusing on my newsletter and my other channels. I don't think YouTube is for me. And you might say, oh, she failed at YouTube. But I don't think that's a failure. I made the informed decision to not continue doing YouTube videos based on the data I collected.
Love it, love it. And I don't know, there are so many cliches and quotes on the topic, but genuinely, in my view, the only failure is never having tried at all, because the only resource that we have that's finite is our time. And if you haven't tried something, you just never know, right? It's like the Schrodinger's cat situation. We don't know if the cat's dead or alive. You have to put it to the test and try. Really, really interesting. And I appreciate you sharing your own kind of personal anecdote there, because it's super relevant as well as social media channels. I think all of us feel that, right? Like right now at the time of recording, it's like Substack is taking off. And yeah, I get a lot of pressure to do more on YouTube as well. And it's like someone said, no, actually don't do Substack, you should be prioritizing LinkedIn article. And like, oh my goodness. I mean, look, testament, your newsletter is fantastic. You've got a phenomenal following on there and it fills your cup. So obviously you're in both alignment internally as well as the external signals. But what I'm really curious about is your YouTube experiment. The fact that you did have positive external feedback, why did that not create more motivation for you internally? Because I don't know if because we're all wired differently, but for somebody like me who thrives on positive reinforcement and praise, that would make me feel good.
Yeah, and if in that case, it means your internal signals would be aligned too, right? And for me, it wasn't enough. So that's why it's important to look at both and ask yourself, how does it look like externally? External signals, internal signals. If anytime you get a comment on YouTube, it makes you feel really excited and motivated and you want to keep on posting, then that's your internal signals looking good. And it just means we're different people. And this is also why, again, do not copy paste what other people are doing. Ask yourself and be honest with yourself as well. Where are you getting your motivation from? And if you're someone who gets that motivation from those comments, from that engagement with your audience in that format, go for it. For me, weirdly, when I get an email, a response to my newsletter over email, I get really happy. I open it. I make myself a little cup of coffee and I sit down and I reply to all of the emails that I receive. And I love that,
That's
right?
so nice.
And on YouTube, I don't know if it's because maybe I don't feel as close to people who subscribe on YouTube, or it's a bit more anonymous maybe. I don't know. I don't have this same response.
Yeah. And I think there's something even in that as well. Like I've definitely noticed with myself, like I really crave the answers and the explanations to things, and like to my detriment, especially with like how I'm feeling. Like last week I woke up and I was so tired, and I was just like, why am I this tired? I was like, is it because of this? Is it because of that? Have I been taking too many of these supplements, or not enough, or do I just need a holiday? And I'm like, and it's almost like experiments on steroids where I'm like, I need to know the answer. I guess my question there is, am I wrong for doing that? And is there an element of just accept that is your internal signals and how you feel about something, like your YouTube examples? That's just how I feel. We'll move on.
Yeah. Would you say that overall you're feeling pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you're doing
Just like
well.
a one-off.
Yes, you're doing well. I think there is a risk in trying to over-optimize ourselves and change who we are. And I think we all have our little quirks, and we're a bit weird sometimes, and that's okay.
There's no such thing as normal.
Yeah, exactly, and that's okay. I don't think we need to fix everything and try to normalize our behavior.
So yeah. This goes back to living in the goal-obsessed world and that obsession with optimization, so that when I'm not feeling great, I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why? How can I fix it? What is it? It's just, you're a human being. Yeah. So fascinating. Coming back to decision making, so the internal alignment, we've touched on a couple of times, it's super important. You also talked about kind of the impact, the consequences, taking responsibility of our decisions. I know Jeff Bezos has 1,001 different frameworks that always get cited left, right, and center, and especially in decision making. So he has the what's it called? Whether it's a one-way or a two-way door decision-making framework, right? So it's this reversible and irreversible decision. Just to get everyone up to speed in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Reversible, not the end of the world. Take the shortest amount of time possible to just make a decision, reach it, take action, move on. The irreversible decisions that do have those longer term consequences, take your time, think it through, gut check, all the rest of it. My question to you, Anne-Laure, is do you have any of your own decision-making frameworks to share with my listeners?
Well, the one I just shared with you, internal, external, always for big decisions. And then for the really big ones, I will sit down and I will draw what I call a consequence cascade. And this is really about asking myself, okay, if I do that, what is likely to happen? And if I do that, and if this happens, what is likely to happen? What's really interesting is that very often I get to the end of the cascade and there's really nothing important at the end of it. Whatever the outcome. It's like, oh, what if I cancel this event? Oh, well, then it means I will sell fewer books. What happens if I sell fewer books? Well, I sell fewer books and that's it. There's nothing really bad that happens, right? And so it can be really useful when there's something that feels a little bit paralyzing and you're trying to think about what's going to happen, and you're overthinking it. Just putting it on paper, and especially if you're a visual person, it can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's a great tip. An important reminder is, and I love this, I have to remind myself this fairly frequently, is a decision will get made as time passes, whether or not you like it. Because the longer you take on stalling, what's happening is that you're relinquishing your power and you're letting just time, the passing of time, right, to make the decision for you, whatever that specific thing is. So let's say, for example, maybe it's hiring someone. That's typically, a tough decision for entrepreneurs. Is this the right person? And you've got the cliche again of like hire slow, fire fast. You want to take your time. Is this the right person? But if you take too long deciding, they've gone and got snapped up by somebody else, as just an example there. So any other kind of tips or mental reframes you can share as well, with maybe even more so with getting back into alignment, as that's such a fundamental piece? Like, how can we feel more comfortable with that inner kind of knowing and trusting it as well? Because I feel like we've all got it, but we often ignore it and we override it.
Yeah, what you're talking about is what we psychologists called metacognition, which just means thinking about your own thinking.
Okay.
It means
I spend a lot of time doing that.
It's metacognition is observing your own thoughts, observing your own emotions, trying to understand your inner world, and really understanding the why behind your decisions.
Yeah.
And a very simple way to do this and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do it already, but if anyone listening or watching this is not doing it already, I would highly recommend giving it a try, is a weekly review. Just having a weekly review. You can use any format you want. My format is something I call plus minus next. And it's very simple. It's 3 columns or 3 bullet points in your notes. Plus, you write everything that went well this week, minus everything that didn't go so well, and next, what you want to try next, what you want to iterate on. So really the next part is the most important one because it's about extracting all of the juicy knowledge from the plus and minus and asking yourself, how can I next week have a little bit more of what is in the plus column and a little bit less of what is in the minus column? If you do that and you make sure in that process to pay attention again to internal and external signals, I guarantee you that you're going to figure out your way through whatever challenge you're facing right now. And you're just going to keep on iterating every week, making it a little bit better. And again, even if you don't have a clear plan, you're not quite sure what's going to happen, you can trust that you're going to learn from each iteration.
Yeah, I love that. Tiny experiments. Again, I love anything like that. Practical frameworks, tips, tricks to help set up. Has there been a tiny experiment that has drastically changed your path?
I would say my newsletter experiment definitely has completely changed my life, has changed my career. For me, it might seem like not like a very big experiment, but it was my first time committing to write in English in public, which English is not my first language, and so it was kind of scary. And it was really helpful to design it as an experiment because I just said, I'm just going to do that for this period of time. And if I hate it, I can stop.
Yeah.
And turns out I loved it. And that's how then publishers started getting in touch on the back of my newsletter. I met so many interesting people. I think everything good that has happened business-wise to me in the past few years, I can link back to that experiment.
Wow.
When I said I'm going to experiment with writing online.
Wow, that is so interesting. So how long ago did you start?
That was 6 years ago.
Wow, in 2020.
Yeah.
Was it COVID that spurred it?
No, COVID happened literally 2 months after I got started.
So it's right at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And you've been consistent with it since for 6 years. How often?
Every week.
Every week.
Yeah. I might have missed a few weeks, but most weeks I've
That is hundreds of newsletters.
Oh, yeah.
And I can imagine how that's just so helpful in practicing your skill for longer form writing with a book, right? How did you find, what was the difference between writing newsletters versus a book? Was it a big leap?
It's so funny you're asking this because I was so naive. I thought when I signed this book deal, I felt like, surely I've been writing hundreds of
Like, how
newsletters.
hard can it be? Come on.
Yes. And I
Walk in the
really,
park.
I thought I would take the newsletters and rewrite them and, voila, you get
Yeah.
a book. And
Because you basically have written them, right? If you push together all your
Yes.
newsletters, right?
But it's completely different. A book is a completely different beast. And, you have to... I know it's going to sound obvious, but when you're writing chapter 8, you have to remember what you said in chapter 2, and it has to make sense and build on top of what you said before. And the part that I didn't expect to be so scary for me was how final it felt. As an online entrepreneur, primarily, every time I post something or create a product, it's a digital product, I can go back to it. And I've had people say, oh, by the way, what you wrote in this newsletter, there's actually a new paper that came out.
Right.
And so what you wrote is wrong.
You can update it.
I can update it. I can say sorry, and this is fine. With a book, once it's out in the wild, I can't run after people and say, oops, sorry. That's not what I meant. We ended up cutting an entire chapter from the book.
What's the secret chapter?
It's called Mind Gardening. And it's really about, we talked about information overload a little bit earlier. And it's really about that, how to manage that, how to decide which information to plant into your mind garden, which one to cultivate, which one to weed out. And it's a chapter where it was one of my darlings, basically. We had to kill it.
Oh.
And it was the right decision, right? But as you said, as the author, it was painful knowing the amount of time I had spent writing this chapter that we were going to cut it, but thinking about the experience of the reader, which is what should always come first.
Yeah, exactly.
It made sense to remove it.
Well, appreciate you sharing the chapter. This is like the uncut, like director's cut, version of the book. Anne-Laure, are there any other like neuroscience insights in particular that you want to share with my audience that you haven't already before I come to my traditional closing question?
I can share just a little bit about maybe the neuroscience of uncertainty, which I think is really helpful as an entrepreneur to know a little bit about. So our brains have evolved to try and reduce uncertainty as quickly as possible, which makes sense because if you think about our ancestors, the more information you had, the more likely you were to survive.
Yeah.
And so this is not a problem in the sense that your brain is doing its job. If all you want is to survive, then great. But if you want more than surviving, if you want to actually grow and thrive, then those survival mechanisms can get in the way. So I'm just sharing this because I think as entrepreneurs, it can be really important to pay attention to the moments when you are trying to reduce uncertainty as quickly as possible, which might mean rushing to the first solution that you find or trying to feel in control, and maybe inviting yourself to stay in that space of uncertainty for a little bit longer, even if it's uncomfortable, because very often this is where you have some of the best opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
Great tip. But it does feel so horrible, doesn't it? Yeah. What's worked for you to stay in the discomfort when you've needed to?
Journaling for me has been extremely powerful. I journal every morning, even if it's 5 minutes, but having, again, this little check-in with myself and honestly asking myself, how are we feeling today? And, we're feeling a bit anxious. What are we anxious about? And all of a sudden, you go from this free-floating anxiety to something that you can name. And once you can name it, you can start working with it.
Yeah. Another phrase, an old coach of mine used, which was... you feel the feeling, don't be the feeling. And I think that's, again, another helpful reminder, especially if we don't have that metacognition and or we're not creating that space, we're not sitting with the discomfort or just creating kind of a moment for ourselves. It's so easy to let the emotion take over. It's so easy to your example there, if you're feeling anxious, to just be like, oh my God, I'm just like, that anxiety can feel so overwhelming. But whatever that practice is, if it's journaling, if it's touching grass, quite literally getting out in nature, whatever it is, to create that space. And then to your point, with you name it, okay, this is just how I'm feeling. It's just a feeling. It doesn't rule your life. It doesn't have to rule your day even. Okay, what can we do about this? Love that. Anne-Laure, I've got 1,000 more questions to ask you, but I need to come to my traditional closing question on the show, which I ask all my guests, which is, what's one tragedy that's taught you an unforgettable lesson?
Ooh. Just staying for too long in jobs that made me miserable because I felt like I had to. And I don't do that anymore. I try to get out of situations where I'm not flourishing as quickly as possible now.
Love that. Love that. I guess there's moments that when you're in it where you're like, just give it a bit more time, give it a better chance. Now, are you a lot more cutthroat about it?
Yes. Yeah. I try to. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. Almost every single time when I look back, I feel like I could have left
sooner.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's getting better.
Yeah. I love that. As I said, like our time is short, isn't it? Like I was saying earlier, the only resource we have that's finite is our time. And we're spending that being unhappy, in misalignment, doing things that aren't filling our cup. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, around society's expectations or other expectations that are put on us to continue down a path that doesn't feel right to us.
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Anne-Laure, thank you so much for coming on Strategy and Tragedy. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your pearls of wisdom, as well as, the neuroscience insights, as well as some practical tips and tricks. I'm sure my listeners will find it super helpful. Thank you. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you have found this helpful, do let us know. Use this as your opportunity now to do one tiny experiment and let us know how you get on. All right, hopefully see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.